My name is Tori Townsend, and I'm 38 years old. I was the daughter nobody bragged about. Growing up in the Townsend house meant growing up in Marcus's shadow. My brother was 3 years older, broad-shouldered, effortlessly charming, the kind of person strangers trusted within minutes of meeting him. Every family dinner, every holiday gathering, every casual conversation with relatives somehow found its way back to Marcus. His grades, his awards, his potential, his future. I used to sit across the table eating quietly, watching my mother's face change when she looked at him versus when she looked at me. It wasn't dramatic. It was just different. Warmer. More alive. I was 14 the first time I remember it cutting deep. I came home with an 89 on a math exam I had spent 3 weeks preparing for. My father barely looked up from the newspaper. He said, "Marcus got a 96 on his last one." Nothing else. No acknowledgement of the effort, no recognition that I had worked hard. Just a number that wasn't mine placed next to mine to make mine feel smaller. I went in my room and I didn't cry because I had already started learning that crying didn't change the comparison. It just made you look weaker on top of everything else. By my mid-20s, I had quietly built something real. I started a small financial consulting firm with 2 colleagues I trusted. We worked out of a rented office, took clients nobody else wanted, small businesses bleeding money without understanding why, family restaurants that couldn't read their own margins, contractors who earned well but saved nothing. I was good at it. Not in a loud way. In the way where the numbers told the truth and clients called back and sent their friends. Marcus, meanwhile, had become the family centerpiece in an even more visible way. He launched a hospitality company in his early 30s, acquiring restaurant venues and event spaces across the state. His social media was a constant stream of glamorous openings, celebrity appearances, and glossy magazine features. My parents attended every ribbon cutting. My mother kept a folder of printed articles about him, thick with clippings, edges soft from how often she handled it. I saw it once on the kitchen counter, and I stood there looking at it for longer than I should have. What nobody in my family knew was that Marcus was drowning. It started with a casual mention from Diane, a woman who ran a catering supply company and knew the industry well. She said Marcus's venues were behind on invoices. Significantly behind. I didn't think much of it at first. Cash flow problems are common in hospitality. But then a second contact mentioned it. Then a third. My brain did what it always does when numbers don't add up. It kept running. What I found over the following months, through public filings and industry contacts and conversations with people who were tired of being patient, was a pattern that made my stomach tighten every time I looked at it. Marcus had been leveraging the appearance of success to secure loans against properties he didn't fully own. He had investors who believed they were partners in profitable businesses, but had never received a proper accounting. His books were a performance, not a record. And somewhere inside all of this, he had convinced our parents to trust him with money. I learned this from my mother, not because she told me willingly, but because I arrived at the house one afternoon and she was on the phone in that hushed, tight voice she used when something was wrong. When she hung up, she looked at me and said, without any awareness of how it would land, "I just wish you were more like Marcus. He's doing something meaningful with his life." I asked what she meant by meaningful. She said Marcus had vision. She said some people understand how to build a legacy and some people just manage other people's small problems. She wasn't trying to be cruel. That almost made it worse. She genuinely believed it. I didn't say what I knew. Not yet. I sat with it the way I had sat with everything in that house my whole life, carefully, privately, without making a scene. Then Marcus announced his annual charity gala. Black tie, held at his most impressive venue, a converted ballroom in the center of the city. He called it the Townsend Foundation Gala, a name he had invented entirely for the occasion. There was no foundation, no registered charity, no legal paper trail connecting the event to any actual charitable organization. Tickets were $800 each. Donors were invited to contribute to what the promotional materials described as a fund supporting young entrepreneurs in underserved communities. My parents were seated at the head table. My mother had bought a new dress. My father had his best suit dry cleaned. They were glowing with pride. I was also in that room. Marcus had not invited me. I had purchased a ticket under my business name and sat near the back in a dark blazer with a folder in my bag. Inside that folder was 2 weeks of carefully assembled documentation. Bank records obtained through legitimate channels, public filings, and correspondence forwarded to me by 2 of Marcus's former investors who had run out of patience and were ready to talk. I watched my brother take the stage to applause. I watched him speak about generosity and community and the responsibility of those who succeed to lift others. I watched my mother press her hand to her chest like she might cry from pride. The moment came when the host opened the floor for guest remarks. I stood up. Marcus saw me from the stage and something shifted in his expression, a tightening around the eyes, a stillness that replaced his easy confidence. He knew immediately that my being there meant something. My mother chuckled from the head table. She leaned toward the woman beside her, and I heard her clearly across that high-ceilinged room. She said, "Low but not low enough. That's his sister. She'll never be as good as him." I stood up straight. I looked at Marcus. Then I looked at my mother. I said, "Then tell him to pay all the bills. I'm not sending money anymore." My mother's face shifted. She said, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "What money? We never received a single dollar from you." The room went very quiet. I opened my folder. The silence in that ballroom had weight to it. Not the comfortable pause between songs or the respectful quiet before a speech. This was the stillness of 300 people sensing something was wrong all at once. Forks had been set down. Conversations had stopped mid-sentence. Everyone was looking at me, a woman near the back holding a folder, facing a stage where her brother stood with a microphone and an expression he was working hard to control. My mother's words were still in the air. "We never received a single dollar from you." What she didn't know is that I had been sending money for 4 years. Not to my parents directly. To Marcus. At his request, with his assurance that he was managing the household expenses since our father's health had declined. He had called me twice a year, calm and reasonable, always with a specific amount and a specific account number. I had sent him just over $62,000 across those 4 years. Not once had he passed a single dollar of it to our parents. I walked to the front of the room. People shifted to let me through. I stood at floor level, facing the room, and I spoke without raising my voice because I had learned that calm is more frightening than anger to people who are used to getting away with things. I said the Townsend Foundation did not exist as a registered charitable organization. I said I had statements from 2 investors present at this gala who had been promised returns and accounting reports they had never received. I said I had wire transfer records showing that funds described as venue renovation loans had been used to cover personal expenses and maintain the appearance of a business that had been insolvent for at least 14 months. I set the folder on the nearest table and said anyone who wanted to review the documents was welcome to do so. The room broke open. Not in shouting, but in the low, urgent sound of 300 people turning to each other at once. Chairs moved. Someone near the front said Marcus's name in a sharp tone. 2 men in suits near the side wall, the investors Diane had connected me with, stood up and moved toward the stage with phones already raised. Marcus spoke. He said my name in a voice trying to be authoritative and failing. He said I had always resented his success. He said I was making accusations I couldn't support. He said this was a family matter being dragged into a public space. I said the $62,000 I had transferred to him over 4 years, money my own mother just told this room she never received, had already made it a public matter the moment he sold $800 tickets to a charity that did not legally exist. He stepped down from the stage and came toward me, lowering his voice, saying I didn't understand the full picture, that the money had been used for business purposes, that he had planned to pay it back, that this was not the time or the place. I said the place was wherever the people he owed answers to happened to be standing. He turned to our parents and began to explain. The explanation was elaborate, involving cash flow timing and investment cycles and a restructuring plan he had been quietly developing. It had the texture of something rehearsed, not for this specific room, but for a version of this moment he had always known was coming. My father stopped him. My father, who had barely raised his voice in 30 years, who had sat at dinner tables letting comparisons land without question. held up one hand and said simply, "Stop." The word landed like a door closing. He looked at me, not with the reflexive comparison I had grown up with, not measuring me against Marcus or finding me wanting. He looked at me directly and asked quietly if the documents were complete and verifiable. I said yes. He asked if I had copies secured. I said I had sent copies to my attorney that morning with instructions to proceed if I hadn't contacted them by midnight. He nodded once. Then he said, "You've been taking care of things I didn't even know needed taking care of." It wasn't a full apology. It wasn't an undoing of 38 years. It was one sentence from a tired man at a table built on money that wasn't real, and it still meant something to me. I won't pretend otherwise. Marcus left before the evening ended. The two investors followed him out. The host announced the fundraising portion was suspended pending clarification. People left in quiet clusters. My mother found me as the room was emptying. She didn't speak for a moment, just looked at me the way you look at something you've been walking past for years without actually seeing. She asked why I had kept sending money when I was never acknowledged, never credited, always compared and found lacking. I told her the truth. I said because they were my parents and I believed they needed it, and I didn't send it for recognition. I sent it because it was the right thing to do. She held my hand for a moment, and she said she was sorry. Not for everything, not in the way the word fully deserves. But she meant it. And that was more than I had expected to walk out of that room with. Marcus faced a civil case brought by 3 investors in the months that followed. The gala funds were frozen. The venues went through restructuring that stripped away the illusion and left behind something smaller, but at least honest. He and I have not spoken since that night. My parents are older now and need real support. I still provide it directly with full transparency, the way money should always move between people who are trying to trust each other again. I am not the daughter anyone bragged about. I never will be in the way that fills folders on kitchen counters or earns applause at ribbon cuttings. But I am the one who showed up with the truth when the room needed it. And I have understood, finally, at 38 years old, that there is a strength particular to the person nobody sees coming. They never see you coming because they never truly looked at you. That, in the end, is the advantage.